Hi everybody, this is Dan Stolbarger. Welcome to this week's KFIR Middle East Update. It's the week of March 19th. And so for all you vets out there, you know what's coming next. Make sure you get the PDF PowerPoint that accompanies this presentation because there's much more in the PowerPoint with photos, etc., that we have time for the video. So it should be on the YouTube link, or you can go to our website at holygroundexplorations.com. Click that and you'll have the PowerPoint that, again, accompanies this presentation. Our first section of what we do here, if you're new, is we call it News Bites. And so just a lot of bam, bam, bam sort of things that are going on in Israel. I should say this, keep in mind, it is less than a week away for Israeli elections. So a lot that's going on, where it's politics, right? So when I mentioned that the health ministry is saying they're preparing to put an end to the outdoor mask mandate by April, Netanyahu has opened restaurants, theaters, gyms, the airport to some extent. So, in claiming victory over COVID, again, is that just part of his platform or is this going to hold? Iran, this is again in News Bites, is now using advanced new centrifuges to enrich uranium at the Natanz plant. This was leaked by the Atomic Watchdog report that basically says Iran once again is breaking all the rules and they're enriching and installing more. Kosovo has officially announced the opening of its embassy in Jerusalem. They announced that last Sunday, and you'll find later on in this report, Netanyahu is claiming there are 4 more countries that are ready to come in. And then March Madness, not just here, the NCAA basketball, but in Israel with less than a week to go for Israeli elections, the latest polls give us no hard clues as to who will be the next prime minister. Again, remember, there's not one party that's going to garner all of the seats that are needed for a coalition. They have to form compromise, and different parties join together in order to get past that 61 mark. And so you have kingmakers that basically don't have the most seats, but the amount of seats that they do have puts the leading party over the top. And so the question is that Naftali Bennett? And at this point in time, it's really up in the air. There are some that are saying that Netanyahu is the only one that's going to be able to form a right-wing government, which leads to those that look at Israeli politics as saying, don't think that this is the last election. There's another one that's going to come down the pike because none of these parties are going to be able to form a coalition. So we'll have to wait and see on that. And so that's our news bites for the week. Let's take a look at other things, more detailed articles. That's why I always say get the PDF, because here the first thing I want to report on is new discoveries in Qumran caves, Dead Sea Scrolls. It's amazing. We've always wondered, was that it when it comes to all the scrolls that have been found in the Qumran area? Or what happens if there's more? And sure enough, over the last month, and it was just reported this week, there were more biblical fragments that were found in different caves. It's actually called the Cave of Hor in Qumran, because they found the bones of a young person there, but they found an intact basket that's been woven, but they found fragments from the books of Zechariah and Nahum. They were discovered in clumps. They were rolled up into this cave. And so the question is going to be, will there be more? There's no reason to assume there won't be. And when I read this, I thought it was fascinating. So I'm going to give you an assignment, a homework assignment, because the fragments that were found are from Zechariah chapter 8, verse 16 and 17, as well as verses from Nahum chapter 1, verses 5 and 6. Make sure you read those. I don't think it's a coincidence that these were discovered this week, over 2,000 years old. It's the Word of God. It's still alive, and it still speaks today. So check that out. And as we mentioned with Israeli elections, kingmaker. It's going to take some manipulation and compromises, but it appears that Likud that's Netanyahu's party, is kind of solidly in control. But the bottom line is for them to form a coalition, they'll have to negotiate with Naftali Bennett. And he's the head of Yamnia, and that's going to be the issue. If there can be a compromise worked out there, then I think we see Netanyahu continuing as prime minister. You don't know what the negotiations are going to be. If they don't form a coalition together, then look for another election. As I mentioned, Netanyahu has said there are 4 more Arab countries that are negotiating as part of this Abrahamic Accords. His quote it's a political speech. Are you ready? His quote is, "I pledge to take care of the citizens of Israel. I do so with a deep mission. I brought back vaccines, and I brought 4 peace agreements, and there are 4 more on the way." And this was just issued today. Now, he didn't name the countries, but there's speculation. Jared Kushner has revealed his sources, and the thought is that 3 of them are familiar. It's sort of ongoing to what the Trump administration had done. But 3 of the 4, you ready for this? Saudi Arabia, huge. Qatar, huge. And Oman. Those are the names that are being leaked at this time, and we'll have to wait and see if that's formalized before the upcoming elections. The question always is, who's next? Once Netanyahu is finished, who's next in line? And this is, again, interesting topic of conversation. And it appears that for the first time, Netanyahu is actually talking about this. Those close to Bibi have him uttered in what they would consider a startling sentence, that there are 2 people that he feels are fit to lead Israel once he's gone. One is Ron Dermer, and the other is Yossi Cohen. Now, Yossi Cohen just recently stepped down as the head of Mossad. And so this seems to be the guy that's waiting in the wings. He seems to have Netanyahu's blessing for it. And if this election comes down to, just like the elections here in the States, you had 3 votes. You either were voting Trump, or you were voting Biden, or you were voting anybody against Trump, the never Trumpers. It's sort of similar in Israel, is that you have some that are never Bibi, never anybody else but Bibi. If they cannot form a coalition, Bibi may step down, and we may have the next prime minister being the longtime Mossad operations man, who was widely believed to be behind the dramatic killings of Iran's nuclear weapons chief, Fakhrizadeh. I think that's how you say his name. And so interesting to see that this is being leaked at this particular time. And then unfortunate news, An internal Biden memo has been leaked as well, stating that the Biden administration will reportedly push for a two-state solution based on the pre-1967 borders, with mutually agreed land swaps, reinstating U.S. policy on the Israeli-Palestinian conflict to be more traditionally, the ones that have all failed since Oslo, by the way, than those that were presented by former President Donald Trump. So many believe that this would be the case, but now it's coming to the forefront. If you have concerns about this or questions, just Google pre-1967 borders and look at the obstacles that stand in the way of any lasting peace agreement between the Palestinians and Israel. We'll talk more about this in weeks to come. The IDF, some 81%, that's IDF for you newbies, this is the Israeli Defense Forces, the army. The IDF has claimed that 81% of all of its servants were vaccinated with 2 doses and they've recovered from the virus. The spokesperson announced on Thursday says it's the highest figure of vaccinated troops among all the armies in the world. And based on that data, the IDF estimates that this percentage of individuals is sufficient enough to create a herd immunity in the coming weeks. So once again, we're closing in over 5 million people in Israel has been vaccinated, closing on around 6 million. They're going to claim, Netanyahu's going to claim the vaccine is miraculous. Look at our rates. COVID is in our rear view mirror. We're opening everything else. We have defeated it. And so again, if you want to know more about what herd immunity is, take a look at the article and I've given you a definition of that. Couple things to end with. There's an article here I hope you take the time to read that's basically entitled Canceling Culture. You know, over the last month, we've heard about the Dr. Seuss books, the Bernstein Bears books, and things like that. Anything that deals with either what's perceived as racial, I can say it, hold on, race insensitivity, or gender, not being gender neutral or whatever, is now being banned in our schools. And this article asks the question, is the Bible next? So take your time, make your way through that. And then when you think, oh, what's the big deal about anti-Semitism? It's a thing of the past. Well, in Poland, you can now buy a candle that's simply entitled Burn a Jew. A Burn a Jew candle in Poland. I have no words. This, by the way, is the end of what we have to share with you this week. Again, back to the scriptures. Make sure you read those passages in Zechariah and Nahum. Remember, pray for the peace of Jerusalem, and remember God's promise that I will bless those who bless thee, and I will curse those who curse thee. Pray for the peace of Jerusalem. Stand with Israel in this day. God bless you, and shalom.